Welcome! The last time we took a journey into the Mega Man X world was with the first game in the series. It was a big part of my childhood, and a game I still love to this day. I recommend checking out my retrospective for it if you haven't already before watching the rest of this video. While reviewing my personal favorite entry in the series first means things can only go downhill from there, that doesn't mean it has to be bad from here on out. Starting off, I didn't own Mega Man X2 until the Mega Man X collection on GameCube. But I did get to play it as a kid thanks to my local rental shop, which had a great pizza place operating out of the back of it. There was nothing greater as a kid than stopping by, renting a couple of games for the weekend, and then getting a pizza at the same time. But I digress. We're here to talk about Mega Man X2 after all. As a kid, I liked this game, but never enough to consider buying it during the Super Nintendo era. As I got older and revisited the game again, I found that it's still a fun adventure, but there are some things I don't like about it. Before I dive too far into this review, I have to mention that there will be spoilers. Not just for this game, but also potentially for other Mega Man games as well. You have been warned. Mega Man X2 picks up 6 months after the events of Mega Man X. X is now the leader of the Maverick Hunters, and the group is still trying to track down rogue Reploids, or Mavericks as they're called, from Sigma's insurrection. The opening stage features this awesome bike scene with X and the fandom's favorite Green Biker Dude assaulting a base. Alas, Green Biker Dude dies in a blaze of glory, and X has to continue on by himself. After fighting through the base, X has to take on a massive boss that's actually fairly easy to beat. I guess this is one of those cases of looks being deceiving. After the opening stage, the game switches over to the typical Battle 8 bosses formula that the Mega Man series is known for. However, this time it's with a bigger focus on story thanks to the addition of additional cutscenes. Heck, we even get to see Dr. Kane in-game this time around. The misguided doctor is finally getting some respect, though I think he should have kept that hard hat. It was a good look for him. These cutscenes also show off the new enemies of the game, the X Hunters. As the name implies, they are a group of 3 Mavericks seeking to defeat X. They consist of Serges, Violin, and Agile. Shortly into the game, these guys drop some cryptic hints about needing to complete something and determine they need to fight X to give them enough time to do so. This has them challenging X for pieces of Zero. Like I said in my Mega Man X review, Zero never stays dead for long. Poor guy couldn't even get one game before being brought back in as a plot device. Unfortunately, this is where my problems with X2 start. I don't understand why the X Hunters are offering up Zero's part if they are defeated. Can't they just fight X and not give him the part if they lose? Are we supposed to believe that evil Mavericks have some kind of moral code that requires them to reward X if they are defeated? It just doesn't make much sense to me. Also, when the player fights Serges for the first time, he says that what the X Hunters are doing is for the good of the world. Then, after his second defeat, he starts talking about a prophecy that needs to be fulfilled. Just what the heck does any of this mean? I get that Mega Man X has its own fair share of translation problems, but without looking up the original Japanese text online, all of this kinda just comes across as cryptic nonsense. I really wish Capcom would have included more accurate translations when it re-released these games in the Mega Man X Legacy Collection. Either way, let's keep this Reploid train a-rollin'. The collecting Zero parts mechanic in Mega Man X2 exists to introduce multiple endings in the game. To jump ahead in the story a bit, X can collect all of Zero's parts, and in doing so, save him. This has Zero coming in to defeat a black copy of himself at the end of the game, though this won't be the last time we see a black Zero in the series. If the player doesn't collect all the parts, then they have to fight a brainwashed Zero serving under Sigma. A small side note here. I fully expected to go into this game ranting about the Zero fight. He gave me loads of trouble as a kid, and I hated the battle. But this time around, I found him to be incredibly easy to beat. That's a nice change for once. Typically, it feels like when I go back to play a game as an adult, I find it harder than when I was a kid. Granted, a lot of that likely has to do with my lack of patience compared to when I was younger. My biggest problem with collecting Zero parts is how the game handles it. If a player enters a level with one of the X Hunters, they have to fight and defeat them to get Zero's part. If they can't for some reason, such as the X Hunter's area being in a place that requires a specific weapon or upgrade to reach, then the player loses out on that part. After completing the level, the X Hunter disappears from the map, taking their Zero part with them. The only way to avoid this is resetting back to before the player started that level or intentionally dying to get back to the level select screen. I'm pretty sure the idea here was to encourage multiple playthroughs of Mega Man X2 with the splitting paths for Zero parts, but the way it's done in this game just annoys me a little bit. Speaking of things that annoy me, let's talk about collectibles. Just like in Mega Man X, there are plenty of upgrades to find in Mega Man X2. That includes armor parts, energy tanks, and heart containers. You know, the basics in this series. Unlike Mega Man X, many of these upgrades aren't easy to find. Luckily, the helmet upgrade points players in the right direction with a locator function, but that still doesn't mean the player can get the upgrade once they find it. This is due to many upgrades in Mega Man X being hidden behind other upgrades. Some of these will require the leg upgrades, which lets the player dash in air this time around. Others will need certain boss weapons or the upgraded X-Buster so that players can charge boss weapons. Wait a second. X already got an upgrade in Mega Man X so that he could charge boss weapons. It comes from either a Dr. Light capsule or the story via Zero. We get to keep the dash boots from that game, so why not the charging weapon feature too? It just doesn't make any sense to me. One improvement worth noting in Mega Man X2 is reducing the grind to fill energy tanks. That's thanks to these secret areas that drop infinite health when charging Morph-Moth's weapon. Unfortunately, it feels like enemies in the game drop less health items as a result. To be fair, I could have just been having really bad luck with drops, but it was frustrating at times just how little health I would get from enemies. Speaking of upgrades, I really like how X2 goes about introducing them to the player. Let's take the Buster upgrade for example. Players find it in Wheel Gator's stage. It allows them to ready 2 charge shots instead of 1. One of the first enemies the player encounters after this is a Maverick with a shield. If the player hits the shield with a charge shot, it flies into the air, which opens him for an attack with the second charge shot. I will always love when a game teaches players about a mechanic in a game without a tutorial. It's great game design that teaches the player while also making them feel like it's something they learned on their own. Many of the new weapons and upgrades also have plenty of uses during levels, and the game encourages the player to utilize them. That's great compared to the first X game, where most of the weapons just kinda felt useless outside of their boss fights. X2 also features a secret weapon upgrade. While Mega Man X let players get the Hadouken from Street Fighter, X2 offers them the Shoryuken instead. It's another great nod to Capcom's fighting series, and is fun to use as well, even if it doesn't always one-shot bosses. Yet again, Capcom awards players with a weapon and immediately introduces them a way to use it. Right after getting the upgrade, the players will fight Agile in his final form. He hovers above them at the top of the screen and can be a pain to hit. Except if the player uses the Shoryuken to take him out in one blow and... Oh, I see how it is, Capcom. If X so much as grazes a spike, he dies instantly, but now that he's in a cutscene, he's completely immune to them. Whatever. So the only complaint I have about the Shoryuken is that it requires players to collect everything to unlock it. Not just all the upgrades, but also all the Zero parts. Considering my complaints about the Zero parts collecting aspect of the game, I'm sure you can understand why I'm not a fan of locking this secret upgrade behind them. At the same time, it's at least possible to get the Shoryuken without a guide, which isn't the case with the Hadouken in X1. There's another small complaint I have with X2, and it's Sigma. That's right, Sigma is back once again. I mean, we knew this was coming with the end of the first game, but I wish we could have gone one game without him. With its larger story, Mega Man X2 introduces the 3 X-Hunters, which are villains enough in this game. Heck, there are even hints that Surges is most likely Dr. Wily from the classic Mega Man series decked out in a new robot body. Those hints are mostly gone in the English version, but are out in the open in Japanese. That's a concept I would love to see explored more. But instead, Mega Man X2 is happy just to toss players against Sigma once again at the very end of the game. It kinda just kills the build-up the game was going for with all of its mysteries. At least Sigma is nice enough to drop some hints about Zero's past as he dies. He implies that Zero is the last of Dr. Wily's creations, which is a new concept that fleshes out his character more in this game. To be clear, it's not that I'm against Sigma returning, it's just that this time around it really feels like he wasn't necessary, and more could have been done without him. Also, he just looks so freaking goofy this time around. Like, I know this is a preference thing, but this design just doesn't do it for me. Something about his nose is off, and it makes him look like a joke to me. I don't know, that's just my take on it. But I'm not looking to make this a negative review, so let's just move on. Mega Man X2 also continues to offer great pixel art, just like Mega Man X does. Plus, there are a couple of moments where the game has wireframe enemies. While these may not seem super cool now, it blew my mind as a kid seeing 3D enemies in my 2D Mega Man game. I do have to mention that X2 suffers from slowdown more frequently than X1. I found this somewhat annoying to deal with considering how much it messes with me during the Surge's boss fight. The only slowdown I can think of in X1 is the cart ride near the end of Armored Armadillo's stage. In that case it feels intentional and actually adds to the game. I wish I was as happy with this music as I was in the first game, but that's not the case with X2. While there are some really good tracks, others just feel like a jumble of sounds to me. Yet again, this is just a case of personal preference. Let's just count this as a net neutral and move on. Another thing I continue to enjoy are the ending scenes of the X games. X's constant struggle for peace and distaste for combat is seen here again. It's a character trait of his that I enjoy, and one that will lead to some controversial choices down the road. X also laments the sacrifices that have to be made for peace, rip Green Biker Dude, while wondering if more sacrifices will be necessary. Overall, Mega Man X2 is one that I see as worth revisiting. While it's true that I don't like this game as much as X1, there is still plenty to love here. Truthfully, there are only a couple of games in the X series that I really don't consider worth playing, but we'll cross those bridges in time. It's kinda funny, I first played X2 for this retrospective via the X collection on GameCube, and was distraught to find that I wasn't enjoying the game like I did in my youth. I waited a bit and returned to it on PC while using my SN30 Pro, and my opinion completely changed. I really think this is just an example of how bad controls can hurt a game. The GameCube doesn't have anything close to a proper D-pad, and I hate using joysticks on 2D platformers. That was really messing with me, but those problems disappeared once I had a real D-pad to work with. That's not really super relevant to the review or anything, I just wanted to point it out. I'm also going to take this time to mention a slight change to the channel. Up to this point, I've been just releasing reviews as I go along, but that's changing. Outside of one-shot games, I'm going to try and review games from series one after another, with some exceptions obviously. However, this doesn't mean I'm going to be looking at all the Mega Man X games in a row. Instead, I'll be breaking these larger series up into sets. For example, I'll review Mega Man X3 next to finish off the Super Nintendo trilogy. When I next return to the X series, I'll cover X4, X5, and X6, which all came out on the PlayStation. My goal here is to keep it between 2 and 4 games per set. I think that should allow me to provide consistent reviews of a series without bogging the channel down with 10 Mega Man or 20 Final Fantasy reviews in a row. With all that said and done, I'll see you again when we tackle Mega Man X3. Until then, thank you for watching, and take it easy.